Hello students, welcome back to your class. So the next chapter we have in your module 4 is about your file system. Now what do we see in this particular chapter? We see about the file system and its implementation. So we will be looking to what is a file, how a file is actually managed internally, how it is stored, how it is retrieved, what is the reference that is used. All that is what we will be addressing throughout this chapter. All these days probably you would have just looked a file has an icon on your desktop. Now probably you will learn how it is internally managed. So let us start with the definition. I think most of you have already gone through, you have seen these definitions of file, but let me again put it across. So what could be a file? It could also be called as a named collection of related information that is recorded on the secondary storage, that is your hard disk. File can be a sequence of bytes, lines or record whose meaning is defined by the user or the file creator. File could also be told as a collection of logical related entities, and in user's perspective, file is a small allotment of a logical secondary storage. Now, talking about files, probably we will look into detail what could be the types of files, but commonly files are represented as a data file or a program file. So when I say a data file, it may be a numerical or character file or a binary file, and program file, you all know it is of the source file which has the subroutine and it has the functions and all of it. And if I have to tell it in very general, you will have your text files, source files, object files, executable files. When we see further, you have an exclusive topic on the file types. The next thing that we have is about your file attribute. Now what are these attributes of file? These are used to describe your file even more. Now as a user, you are only interested in that symbolic name that is defined, but for the system, a little more information about this file is your file attribute. Now, where are these file attributes stored? If you have used your Unix system, you could have seen whenever you run your ls-l, ls will give you the file listing, -l will actually give you the attributes. And if I tell in your Windows, probably if you just look into the properties of a file, you can be finding this file attributes. So these are some of the attributes that is listed here. Now for example, a human has a user, you would have specified the name as program1.c, or let me say your file1.c, abc.txt. that is the file name which is in a human readable form, and that is probably specified by the user for his or her convenience. Now what is the identifier? The other attribute that we have is the identifier. So an identifier is a unique tag that will be associated to the file. We also call it as FD, that is the file identifier. So this is used by the system to for a file to be identified. Now, throughout the system, it is a unique number that would be there for a file in the file system. Now, what is the type? There are different types of the file. It could be a .c, .txt, .obj. So that defines the type of the file. There are different types of file that is supported. And the next thing that we have, the location. It is a pointer to locate the file on the device. Here the device I mean is your hard disk. So on the hard disk where it is located, we can be identifying with this pointer. And size, it is obviously the file size that we are talking about. Whether it is a 100 MB or a 200 KB file is the file size that we are talking about. Then we have is the protection. Protection, I think if you again reminding you about your Unix command ls-l, if you run that, you can see there is a list of RWX that is there. That is your read, write, execute permissions. So again, you can modify this permissions. If it is enabled, you get all of it. If it is disabled, you don't see some of it. You can see there are some read-only files that is created. So that is when you are giving an extra protection to the file, telling that this file cannot be modified. So that is the read, write, execute permissions that can be enabled or disabled. The next thing that we have is the time, date and user identification. So here the user identification, it is talking about the information of the creator. Now if I say I have a system with multiple user and I'm assigning each one as user 1, user 2, user 3. So user identification is going to allow me to identify who is the owner of that particular file. If it is created by user 1, then the owner would be the user 1. And time and date, there are various things that you can see. You can have the creation time, you can have the last modification time, last accessed time. So these are some of the time stamps that are timestamp attributes that are available. So whenever we look for file attributes, these are the information or more description about the file that we get. And this information about the file are kept in a directory structure, which is actually maintained on the hard disk. The next thing that we have is the operations on file. So what are the possible operations that can be done on a file? So you have the create operation, read, write, reposition, delete, truncate. And why do we have open and close? We will address that as well. Now what is a file creation? That is when I want to create a new file, I find a space in the file system and I make an entry in the new file in the directory as well. See, when I say this directory structure and the file system, internally there will be a table that is maintained. So every time when there is a new entry and when there is a new removal, there will be an entry that is made, and when there is a removal, there will be a deletion of that entry as well. So whenever you create a new file, it shall be allocated a new space, and also that file shall be given a reference in the table. Now talking about the read and write activities, so probably specific system calls that was used to support your file management. we had seen your open, read, write, delete, and then append. There was some of the system calls that was used. So those system calls will definitely be used in the file operations. So to create a file, you will be creating a file. So whenever a new file is created, the file descriptor, that is the unique ID that we discussed, or the unique identifier, is also created. The next thing, talking about your write. So in the write operation, we will be calling your write system call, and there is also a write pointer that is used. So in the system call, what do we specify? In the system call, we specify the file name that we are interested to write in and the content that we want to write. Next, we are going to search for that specific file, and once the file is found, probably the system keeps the file pointer at the location in the file where you want to write next. That is, if there is already an existing file, and for example there are 10 lines of content in that file, and now you want to write from the 11th line, so this write pointer should be pointing at the 11th line so that you can continue writing from there. If it is a fresh new file, there is no content written, probably the write pointer will be pointing to the very first line of that file where you will start writing. And once the write operation is completed, the write pointer must be updated to the new location. That is how much, if it was pointing from the very first line, if you have written a 20 lines, then the pointer should be updated. So the next time there is any write operation, the pointer should know from where it has to start. Similarly, for your read operation also we will be calling the read system call. Again, here also you specify the file name and the content or the information that you want to read, and then again it is the same procedure just like your write. You search for that specific file in the directory and its associated location, and once the file is found, now the read pointer is going to point at the location you are interested to read from. So the read pointer is going to point to the information you read from, and once you have completed the read operation, again the read pointer would be updated. The next operation that we have is reposition. This was one of the exercise I had given it to you when I had taught you your system call program. That is, it was one of your assignment questions as well, where I asked you to reposition the pointer to another location and read the content from there. Now, if I say now the read pointer has read 10 lines and it is at the 11th line, and now I am interested in some data in the second line, so I have to reposition it to the second line or to the first line or to the end of file. That is when I use the reposition, which is also called as the file seek, where you are moving these read write pointers to a specific desired location of yours. The updated location will be the final location it was there. Other than that, if you want to move to another desired location, you can be doing so by the reposition or your lseek, and there are system calls to do the same. So the appropriate system call shall be called. Again, here also we make the search operation, we find the file, and then in the file you're going to reposition, that is you're going to reposition the pointer that is pointing. The next thing that we have is your delete, that is where you want to completely remove the file from the hard disk. So if you want to delete the file, again you specify the file name that you want to delete. So again there is a search that happens in the directory for the file name. Once it is found, it releases all the memory or the space that it has occupied, and it erases the entry in the directory and other tables that it has made as well. The last operation that we have is truncate. Now there is a difference between your delete and truncate. Delete, I am completely removing that file, releasing all the memory that was allocated to that particular file. But that is not the case with truncate. Truncate is only going to erase the content of the file and the file attributes will still remain intact. Now what do I mean by that? Now for example, I have a file of size 1 MB. If I am deleting a file, the file no more exists in the system and that 1 MB is released, and all the file attributes and every reference of the file is removed from the system. But in case of truncate, I only clear the content, which could shrink my size from 1 MB to probably few 5 KB. But my attributes, my references of that file in the tables and everywhere will still remain intact. Now every operation that I spoke about till now, you have observed that I was telling you have to make a search. So every operation involves searching for the file in the directory entry and then finding a file. To avoid this search repeatedly, we can use the open system call. So open system call can be used by the file first before any of this operation except create. So whenever an open system call is used, the operating system keeps a small table associated with the file. This is called as an open file table. This open file table contains a set of information as listed here. So the open file table is going to track all the files open. Then we have the file pointer that is used to keep track of the last read or write location. Then we have the file open count that is going to track the number of times a particular file was open or closed. Every time you open it increments, every time you close it decrements. So whenever it reaches 0, it indicates that the file is closed for the last time. And then the disk location information is maintained on the cache to avoid the disk location info every time it to be read from the hard disk for each operation. And finally we have the access rights, which specifies whether it is a read, write or an execute, or whether it has only a read access. So why do we have this table? As said earlier, to reduce the search that we make to the directory. So whenever a file operation is requested, this file is specified via an index to this table. So the search is no more required. So the implementation of the open and close operation can get a little complicated when there are several processes that may open the file simultaneously. So the operating system has two other internal table, that is per process table and system wide table. So there will be a table maintained for every individual process about the files that it opens, and there is a system wide table which keep tracks of all the systems that are used, and there are operations that is performed throughout the system. That is, for example, if a process is using 2 files and I have 10 process like that, if there are 10 files, so the system file will have 10 files, and the process per process table will have 2 files each. The next interesting concept that we have is about your file locking. This was one of the concepts that I had discussed to you when we had discussed about your process synchronization. I also told there are many operating systems that use this locking. So what is this file locking? We have already seen in the reader and writer problem. Now if there is a file where multiple processes wants to read, then probably that file may be allowed to be shared by multiple processes. And if there is a file where multiple processors are willing to write, probably it is better to allow one process at a time to write into the file. And you have already seen in the synchronization what could be the issues. Now if there are multiple processes that is accessing to that particular file, again there is race condition, inconsistency of data, and all that we had studied about. So again here you have your shared lock and exclusive lock. Shared lock is nothing but your reader lock, that if there are multiple processes that is willing to read, so it might apply a shared lock. So applying a shared lock indicates that if there is another process that wants to read to the file, it can still apply another shared lock and continue to access the file. But if a process is willing to write to the file, probably it will apply an exclusive lock, which indicates no other process is allowed until this particular process finishes its writing operation. To add on to a little more information to your locking, we have a broad classification, that is mandatory lock and advisory lock. Mandatory lock are the lock that are applied and maintained by the kernel. So the kernel is going to prevent the process from accessing a locked file, and it ensures that whenever it is locked, no other process can use it. Whereas advisory lock are the lock that are applied and programmed by the user using appropriate system calls. So you have system calls to apply a lock. Probably post the class I will share you some of the programs where you can see how a file is locked, what are the system calls that is used. So that is your advisory lock, where the programmer is going to program the process in such a way where it could apply the lock. Whereas mandatory locks are the locks that are locked and managed by the kernel. The next thing that we have is the file types, and probably these are some of the file types which you have already seen and known it. So there is executable file which could have some of this extension exebin.com. So it is a machine language program, so that is ready to be, it is ready to run. Then we have the object file with the extension obj, that is the file that is generated after you compile. Then the source code file, that is nothing but your program file, which could take your C, Java and some of it. And batch files, these are the things that is used in your shell or your Linux platform, so where you can batch a set of commands together and run it at a time. And then we have the text file, word processor, library files, view files, that is your PDF or JPEGs, archival files, and multimedia files. I think these are some of the things that you're very familiar about day in and day out. Let me not get too deep into it. File types can be used to indicate the internal structure of the file. Now, for example, if we say it is a simple binary file, what is the representation of the binary file? How does the operating system understand that it is a binary file? If I say a program file must contain some functions, subroutines, main. So that is the structure of a program file. But that understanding of this is a program file should be made to the operating system. How is it made? So for every file type, there will definitely be a program or a code that is used to identify that file type, and also that is going to support that file type. Now, if we have multiple file structures that is supported by an operating system, then there should be multiple codes that is also stored in the operating system of which type and structure it is supporting. Eventually, the size of the operating system becomes too large. Now, if I tell there are a very few structures that is supported, then probably it would be inconvenient for the programmer. And if I say there are too many structures that is supported, again it would be a confusion to the programmer to which structure it should specify or follow. And also the other disadvantage that we discussed is the size of the operating system. Every operating system must and should support your executable file structure. Now, what is the internal file structure? So look, how is it locating? So it is going to locate a file by its offset. Within a file, it can be using that offset, it can be locating that file. Now, in the disk system, when I say these files are stored on the hard disk, the disk is divided into logical blocks. What does the program or a user see? The programmer or the user does not see it as a hard disk. It just sees it as a sequence of blocks. Now, all disk I/O that is performed is a unit of one block that it is going to read or write. Now, what is the problem here? How is that we are going to match this data or a file to a desired block or the logical record? Now, I will definitely not have any data or a file that will be exactly matching to a particular block. Now, how do I do that? I will do that by packing a number of logical records into one physical block. Now, what are the things that I require? Logical record size, physical block size, and the packing technique that is used. Now, the packing can be done either by the operating system or by the user program. This is a small note about the file structure and the type that it is supporting. The next thing that we have is about your access methods. How do we access your files? So there could be sequential access, direct access, and other access methods. Sequential access is probably used only in tape drives. Is tape drives still in use? Yes, it is in use in your backup technology. Now let us see how a sequential access looks. So the usual example I give for a sequential access and the other one, the counterpart, your direct access, is an example of your tape and your CD. I believe most of you, getting a little nostalgical, most of you use that audio tapes that you had. So that is a typical example of your tape drive, and that is a typical example how sequential access happen. Sequential access happen in an order. So that is, I can be accessing one after the other. Now if I wanted to hear to an audio that is the fourth track, then probably I have to pass through the first, second and the third track. Only then I am able to access the fourth track. So it has to pass through that. So it is in a sequence that it is happening. So what are the operations that happen on a sequential access? It could be read, write, and to reset your pointer. So here it is read next and write next. From wherever it is set, it could read the next portion of that file, and the file pointer is advanced automatically. And for the write, from wherever it is, it would write next. It is nothing but it is going to append it, and again the file pointer is also advanced for the new location. And a file can be reset to the beginning of the tape. So this is the beginning position, end position. So it is similar to your rewind and forward. If you want to go back, that is to the beginning position, you can reset, or to the end of the file. If you want to move to any desired position, it has to linearly pass through all the position, all the files that is there. That is one of the major disadvantages we have with your sequential access. If I want to read a 10th record, I have to pass through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Only then I am able to access my 10th record. As I told you, where is the practical use of sequential file access? It is in the magnetic tape drive, and that is used for your backup operation. The next thing that we have is your direct access, which is similar. This is the operation that happens on your CD or your hard disk. So you can be moving to a fixed location or to a fixed block. Now what happens? The hard disk shall be divided into n blocks, and you can directly access the desired block that you want. You can be reading that nth block, you can be writing to the nth block, or you can position to the nth block. And here the n is the block number that we are referring to. Now, if I have to again give you that typical example of your audio cassette and disc. See, in the audio cassette, I had to forward and rewind to the location that I wanted to go. But in your CD, I have a provision to select a particular track that I wish to play. So here we can directly access the block that we are interested in. So here the file operations are read n, write n, and position n. If you remember previously in the sequential access, we had read next, write next, and position to the beginning. So from the pointer, you could have just read the next bulk information that is there. But in case of your direct access, we directly access to a particular block. The other access method that we have is with your index access. Third is typically built upon a direct access method. So in this method, we will be creating an index for the file. Now, why do I need this index for the file? Now, if I say there is a file with a very large size and I have hundreds of records in it, or I have hundreds of routines in it, it is very difficult for me to find a particular record or a routine. So I start to index that particular file. Now, if I have to give you a simple example, this is very much similar to the index that you have in your textbook. Now, in your textbook, if you see to the end, you have a keyword index that is there. Now, a particular keyword you are looking for is sorted in the alphabetical order. You go look for that keyword and the associated page number, and then you go back to that page number and then look for the content. The same thing happens here. Now, if I want to look for a content in the file and the file is very large, and if it is difficult for me to search through there, then I will be using this index accessing. So I am going to create an index to that file. You can see an example here. So this is the actual file that has so many records. With some attribute, I am creating an index to this particular file, and there would be some logical record number that is associated. So based on that, I would be searching back to that record. For example, if I say record 1 is at position 1 and record 2 is at position 2, record 3 at position 3, record 4 at position 4, so on and so forth. Now, if I want to go to the fourth record, it will immediately point me to that particular position. So these are some of the access methods that we had, and one small disadvantage that is there with the indexing is if the file size gets too large, then the index file also may get large. Then probably there are times where we have to create another index file for the index file. This is something that we saw in the paging mechanism, create a page for the page table. So this will also end up with the same. So these were some of the access methods that we saw for your file. The next thing that we have is about your directory structure and the disk structure. Now, how are the directories in the system? So, what is a directory? It is a collection of nodes that contain the information about all the files. So, you can see here we have the list of files and we have a set of directories. So each file is given under the directory. So here in the directory structure you will be seeing various ways it could be organized. Before we get into the directory structure, we will see a little bit about your disk structure and your file system. Hard disk is divided into multiple partitions. You can have a single directory there, or the whole partition can be treated as a single directory. I will not get into the RAID because RAID by itself is a very huge concept. This is one of the technique that is used to protect your hard disk. I think only I limit to that understanding that RAID is a protection mechanism. I do not want to get very deep into it and the volumes and the volume manager and logical partitions and all of that. Just to give you an illustration, now for example, I can be having a single hard disk, but I shall be having two directories or two partitions. So whole of this is the directory structures, and then you can be having the files within that. Or I can be using a smaller set of hard disk and creating a single partition, and this whole partition I shall be calling it as a device directory. So here my device is my hard disk. Probably these are some of the things that is used in Unix. Unix sees every device and everything that is connected to the system as a file. So here we call your IO as also one of your device files. So here we look into each partition as the directory. Further we will see your file system and the organization of your file system, and then what are the different disk or directory structures that we have. The next thing, a small glimpse about your file system. Now, what is a file system? It is a method that is used to organize your files. If I have to give you a very generic example, when you use your file explorer, I mean on your desktop, when you use your file explorer, you can see that a tree like structure where you have the directory, files in that, subdirectories and all of that. That is a typical file system where you're organizing the files into some order. That is a user view of what the file system is. Typically, internally also there will be some organization and there will be some mechanism that it is arranged. Probably as I showed here, under this particular partition, these are the files and this is the information. There will be some information that is stored, and there are some file system formatting that will be used. When you try to format your system, it will ask which file system that it should follow. So that is telling in which order that you want to structure. There will be some information that is used, some numbering that is given. So that is about your file system. The next thing that we have is what are the operations that are performed on a directory. So the directory can be viewed can be viewed as a symbol table that translates the file name into their directory entries. A directory contains the information about the file, including its attribute, location, and the ownership. Now, to consider a particular directory structure, certain operations on the directory can be considered. So, here are the list of operations. Let me go one by one. The first one is the search for a file. A directory structure can be used to search for a particular file in the directory. Now, the files will be given by its symbolic name. The similar name may indicate a relationship between the file and the table, that is the directory table. So using this we find a match and then we try to search for that particular file. The next one is to create a new file in the directory and to delete a particular file in the directory, to list the files within a directory, to rename a file, to traverse a file, that is if a user wish to access every directory, every file within that directory, if there is a directory, subdirectory, files within that, so you can make a tree traverse. Logical structures to define a directory. So we have a single level directory, two level directory, tree structured directory, a cyclic graph directory and a general graph directory. We will see each one of it. Most of it is not in use, some of it is still in use. We will see the advantage and disadvantage that is associated with each one of it. The first one I have is the single level directory. Single level directory is the most simplest directory structure that we have. All files are contained in the same directory. Now you can notice here, so when the number of files increase in the system, it is difficult to have a unique name for the files because all of it is at the same level. And also there is no differentiation for the number of users. That is, when a system has more than one user, then probably it would be difficult to handle this particular structure, as it is difficult to bring in uniqueness. Even if it is a single user and if there are too many files, it is very difficult and it becomes too daunting to remember all the file names. So, and there is no provision for grouping. So the major disadvantage that we have here is to have a unique name for all the files, and also there is no provision to group the files under different users. The next thing that we have is a two-level directory. Here the two levels that we have is the master file directory and the user file directory. So here each user has its own user file directory, and these user file directories, each user's directories shall be managed by the master file directory. When a user refers to a particular file, so only his own UFD is searched. Different users may have the same file name. You can notice here there is a file A, that is a part of user 1, user 2 and user 3 as well as user 4. So the naming issue that we had previously is no more a issue here because each user is grouped. So the naming issue and the grouping issue that we had previously is eliminated here. Now to create a file for a user, the operating system search only that user's UFD and then whether that file name exists or not. If it does not exist, it allows to create it. The operating system ensures uniqueness only under a set of user file directory. Now to delete a file, the operating system confines its search to that particular UFD again. It cannot accidentally delete another user's file that has the same name. So the creation and the deletion is limited, the search is limited to that particular user. So what the advantages, as I discussed, it is efficient in searching and the issues of naming and grouping that we had was resolved. Now because the users are isolated from one another, if a user wish to share or cooperate, so that may not be possible in this particular structure. It does not allow sharing of the data. Now let us look to the next structure, that is the tree structured directory. This is something that is commonly used, or that is one of the regular directory structures that is used in your Unix. So here we have the root directory and every file in a system has a unique path. A directory may contain a set of files or it can contain a set of subdirectories. A directory in the internal format, the file is represented with a 0 and a subdirectory is represented with a 1. So here we have two types of paths, that is the absolute path and the relative path. Now what is the absolute path? It starts from the root directory to the file, and relative path, you only define the path from the current directory. These are again the concepts probably you have studied in your Unix shell programming. Now talking about how to create a directory. So here we will be, as I told you, this is one of the structures that is used in your Unix, and this is the Unix command that is used, make dir and the directory name. So we could be creating a new file, we could be creating a new directory, but here the deletion is a little tricky. Now how do I delete a directory? I could not be deleting a directory directly. That is, if I have to delete a directory, then probably I should be deleting all the files in that directory and all the subdirectories. Only then I am allowed to delete a directory. This is rm is a command that is used to delete a file. I can delete an empty directory directly, But when I try to delete a non-empty directory, that is, if the directory contains some subdirectories and files, it will not allow me to delete. So until I empty the directory, probably I am not allowed to delete. So here the advantage again that we had in the previous technique, where one user was not allowed to access the file or share the content of another user, is resolved here. A user is allowed to access a file of the other user. The disadvantage here is the path can be very long, especially when we take the absolute path, that is from the root directory. Now for example, if I say this is the file that I want to access, if I take the absolute path, it starts from the root directory and then all the way goes up to this file. So sometimes the path could be quite long. The next technique that we have is the acyclic graph directories. So previously you can notice in the tree structured directory, we had any user could, you can notice here the access of the file is allowed, but you cannot see any file that is shared by two different subdirectories or any subdirectory that is shared by two different directories. This is allowed in the acyclic graph directory, where we could be sharing a particular file or a subdirectory. Now you can notice here there is a file that is shared by two subdirectories, and then I have a subdirectory list that is shared by the other subdirectory W and Word. So a shared directory or file can exist in the file system in two or more places at once, which was not possible in a tree structured directories. So as the name suggests, a cyclic graph is a graph with no cycles. It allows to share, but it also makes sure that there is no cycle. Now how do I create a particular file or a directory? We create a new directory entry that is called a link. A link is a pointer to another file or directory. Now rather than having this file in two different locations, there would be a link that is created that would be pointing to this directory or a file. Now if the file may have multiple absolute paths, then there could be an issue with your dangling pointer. So to resolve that, we can use the back pointers. So we delete all the, now what is the issue that happens when there are link pointers that is given? So if there is a file that is deleted and the link is continuously pointing to the location and there is no file that is available in that location, it ends up continuously pointing. So what is that we could do with the back pointer? Before deleting the file, we actually delete all the references that is associated with the file. Once all the references are deleted, then it would be better to delete a file. So that would resolve the issue of the dangling pointer. So to quickly summarize, so here it is going to allow the sharing of the file. How is the sharing done? It is done by the link pointer. So it is going to provide a link to the other directory or the subdirectory, because it is the common file that is shared. Rather than having two copies of the same file, there will be a link that is given that will end up opening the same file. Now these links may lead to a dangling pointer, that is, it could be opening. If the link exists and the file is deleted, it might try to open to the non-existing file. So the solution is to delete all the references before we delete the file. So the problem with the previous directory structure, that is the acyclic graph structure that we had, is every time that we create a subdirectory or a file, we had to ensure that it doesn't form a cycle. Now if we ignore that and here in the graph we allow to freely create the directory or the file, there is a possibility that it would end up in a cycle. Now when there is a cycle, if there is no proper algorithm that is written for your search and traversals, it may lead to an infinite loop, or it could continuously be searching in that cycle. So one of the solutions that we have is to limit the number of directories that will be accessed during the search. The other problem that we have when we have the graph directory and if there exists a cycle, that is with the deletion. Now in case of acyclic graph directory, now if we said that we could be sharing the file with the link or the reference. Now if the number of link and the reference is 0, it indicates that the file or directory is no more referenced and it could be deleted. But here in this, if there exists a cycle, or in the general graph directory structure, even if there are no references to that particular file or the directory, the reference count may not still be a 0. So this is called as self-referencing anomaly. So there are times where a particular file or directory would be referencing itself and the reference count shall no longer be a 0. So here to delete a file or to clear, we would probably use the garbage collection scheme to determine when the last reference has been deleted. So how does a garbage collection work? In the first pass, it traverses the entire file system and mark everything that can be accessed. And in the second pass, it collects everything that is not marked on the list of free space. So by doing this, we are able to delete in the general graph directory and resolve the disadvantage that we had in the deletion.